Okay, good evening and welcome to the June 10th, 2024 meeting of the Barnstable Planning Board here at Barnstable Town Hall, 367 Main Street, Hyannis, Mass. And we are in the James H. Crocker Jr. Hearing Room, located on the second floor, and it is 7 p.m. Welcome, Michael. The meeting notice has been previously filed with the town clerk in accordance with Massachusetts general law. All application materials may be accessed through the Planning Board website or by contacting Karen Pina at karen.pina@town.barnstable.ma.us or calling 508-862-4064. Notice of recording: the meeting will be televised live via Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition Channel 1072. It may also be accessed via the Government Access Channel live stream at the Town of Barnstable's website. That's streaming85.townofbarnstable.us/cablecast public site. I will now call the meeting to order and introduce our board members and staff, starting with Michael.
Michael Messinas, good evening.
And Matthew.
Matt Tague.
Tim.
Tim O'Neill.
Bob.
Bob Twist, good evening.
Ray.
Good evening, Ray Sexton.
Jim.
Good evening, Jim Kupfer, Assistant Director, Planning and Development.
And Karen.
Good evening, Karen Pina, Administrative Assistant, Planning and Development.
Great, thank you. We'll now start with any general public comment this evening. This would be public comment not related to any of our agenda items this evening. If you have general public comment, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, we will move to our first item this evening, which is the Housing Production Plan. This is a public meeting and all appropriate notice has been given. This is a significant topic with a lot to review and work through. For this reason, I do believe this will be a multi-meeting agenda item. We'll do an introduction tonight, allowing the board and the public time to digest the information provided in the draft plan, as well as the presentation and comments received from the board and the public tonight. We will again have this item on our agenda for the July 8th meeting at 7 p.m. After the presentation, we'll go to the public to see if anyone has anything they'd like to say, and then we'll go to the board for comments prior to moving on with the agenda. And again, as I said, we'll continue the conversation about this topic at our July 8th meeting at 7 p.m. We welcome Planning and Development Director Elizabeth Jenkins. Elizabeth, real quick, I first wanted to thank you for your countless hours of hard work on this draft plan. I'm very interested personally to hear kind of the background on this, where it originated and what its purpose is. And then, of course, your brief summary and overview presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Robichaud, members of the board, and the public. Elizabeth Jenkins, Director of Planning and Development. Thank you for accommodating me first on your agenda this evening, and I will move through quickly in turn. A housing production plan is a proactive plan that identifies a town's housing needs and outlines goals and strategies to increase the number of affordable units and increase housing attainability. The contents of a plan are drafted based on a template provided by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities and apply to all 351 communities across Massachusetts. They include an assessment of a community's housing needs, a requirement for a community engagement process, an analysis of development constraints, of setting affordable housing goals and strategies, as well as the outline of an implementation plan. To date, we have conducted that housing needs assessment. We originally did it a couple of years ago before the 2020 census data was released. We have since updated it with that 2020 census data and 2022 American Community Survey 5-year estimates. This was beneficial because it also helped to match up with the data in the Cape Cod Commission's regional housing needs assessment. So as we think about metrics and tracking both locally and regionally going forward, we'll find this is highly beneficial. We have had a significant amount of community engagement that was involved in the initial drafting of the process. We did an online survey, held focus groups with over 80 participants, and held 2 community workshops. So that was the basis for writing this plan, where the needs assessment and the community engagement. Now we bring it back to the community to talk about the product and get initial feedback prior to adoption. Some of the main themes that came out of that public outreach initially were that moderately priced and deed-restricted affordable housing were very hard to find here in Barnstable. We had a lack of supply. That seasonal workers, young adults, and seniors were the most in need of housing. Our barriers systematically across the town were wastewater constraints and zoning. Opportunities identified were public-private partnerships to bring more housing to the town, and still a need to streamline development processes and consider more programmatic approaches. So I want to walk briefly through the numbers around the people of the town of Barnstable as well as our housing. Since 2010, when we did this plan, we saw a decrease in the number of our households, but an increase in our total population by 8%. We're also continue to age. The proportion of adults over 60 has about 30% of our current population. 7 in 10 residents live in 1 or 2 person households, although the majority of our housing stock is 3 or more bedrooms. Our demographic profile, we continue to become more diverse. 1 in 5 residents are Black, Indigenous, or people of color. In Hyannis, that's 46% of the population. 17% of people in Barnstable were born outside of the U.S., and 20 English is not their primary language. 1 in 10 have some form of disability, and 60% of our residents have not obtained a bachelor's degree. Our housing profile across the town of Barnstable, 84% of our total housing units are detached single-family homes, and 84% of our housing stock is available only for home ownership, meaning 26% for rental. About 1 in 4 units is seasonal. I actually think, based on my experience, this is probably higher. Probably about 1 in 3 units are available only for seasonal rentals. The housing affordability is probably the big place where we've seen the most change since 2020. We've seen these skyrocketing, 2010, we've seen skyrocketing housing prices. The median price for a single family home in Barnstable in 2023 was almost $800,000. A little less data on condos, but the 2022 number was $295,000. Estimated average rent about $2,000 a month. We found that doing sort of an anecdotal survey for a 2-bedroom, you were getting close to $2,500 being the average rent for a market rate rental here in town. And we see the impact of these housing prices and of the stagnant wages that we see households earning here in the town of Barnstable by looking at a figure we call cost burden. That means looking at households who are spending 30% or more of their total household income solely on income costs alone. 37% of all households across the town of Barnstable are cost burden. 37% of households are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. If you're low and moderate income household, making at less than 80% of the area median income or less, 72% of those households are cost burdened, and 17% of our total households are severely cost burdened, meaning they are spending more than 50% of their total income on housing costs. This obviously does not allow families opportunities to pay for other basic household needs, much less enjoy a decent quality of life living here on the Cape. So these are our challenges as a community. What are we doing about it? You're the planning board, so one of something in your wheelhouse is definitely zoning. It's one of our primary tools to influence land use, influence the location, rate, and character of new development, but it also can be a barrier to development if it's not reviewed and updated to meet current needs and conditions. Unpredictable permitting, zoning that's unresponsive to market demands can stop housing production and development in its tracks. The town has done some great things since our last housing production plan. We've passed accessory dwelling units by right in July of 2021. We have 35 ADUs that came out of that and 41 active permits. That's awesome production compared to what we've seen in other communities across the Cape. The planning board also supported the Downtown Hyannis zoning initiative in February 2023. As a result of that, within our growth incentive zone, we have 36 units under construction, 348 permitted, and 232 in permitting. So you can see market being very, very responsive to the housing demand and zoning that encouraged housing to go forward. Town also has a good program for subsidizing and incentivizing affordable housing. Housing is just too expensive to build and be affordable and attainable under current market conditions, but we have an Affordable Housing Growth and Development Trust, which has about $4.5 million that in mostly CPA funds available to help gap fund or further incentivize affordable housing programs. We participate in the Housing Development Incentive Program, which gives tax benefits it to market rate residential units to help buy them down and make them more attainable. We also have a housing choice designation, which is essentially a reward from the Commonwealth that says, you've done a great job implementing best practices in housing policy. And a result of that, we get favorable and preferential consideration in grants that help us do more planning, more zoning, and in addition, now infrastructure investments. Municipal land is an amazing tool to have in your toolbox when it comes to encouraging affordable housing development, because it defrays that cost of the development. You can control the cost of that land, which is one of your three primary costs of housing. It's land, labor, and materials. So if you can take out the cost of land, you can build affordability into these developments. And you can also create housing on the town's terms in terms of typology, density, design. So this has been a focus of ours recently. We did a small project, just a one parcel house on the hill that the town council agreed to sell to Habitat for Humanity for 2 affordable homes, but a great model for that process that we could use again going forward, working on the Barnstable Adult Community Master Plan to see if there is additional opportunity for housing for seniors or teachers in that location. And Mr. Kupfer has been doing great work on the Marston's Mills former school plan to see if the community is interested in supporting housing potential there. So we're walking briefly through the goals of the housing production plan. One of the goals that's required in a housing production plan as a result of Mass General Law 40B is to get 10% of your year-round housing units on the subsidized housing inventory, meaning 10% of your units permanently deed restricted affordable within your community. We expanded that goal a little bit farther, saying, we want to make sure we're focusing on affordable year-round housing for seniors, families, both rental and ownership, and those for special needs. In additionally, seasonal and year-round housing options for employers, and more diverse housing options accessible to moderate income individuals and families. Currently, the town of Barnstable is at 6.78% of its total housing stock on the subsidized housing inventory. You have public comments in front of you. One of the great conversations we had with the housing committee was, 10% is a great goal, but let's all sort of keep in mind our community's needs and try to set our priorities based on that, and not necessarily this goal, which helps essentially protect the town from additional 40B development if we should reach it. Also certainly important to the planning board, a goal to ensure that new development promotes a high quality of life for its residents, and it's consistent with our townwide land use policies, protection of natural resources, prioritizing reused, vacant, or underutilized property, and locating in places that have public transportation infrastructure, and making sure our zoning that encourages housing is consistent with our local comprehensive plan. Also, and I think new to this plan, is a recognition that we need to assist in stabilizing housing and providing housing assistance programs for the most vulnerable residents in our community, especially those living in inadequate housing conditions, homeless, or at risk of homelessness. As a community, we need to enhance our local capacity to implement housing initiatives and strengthen working partnerships. And again, partner to promote greater public awareness and understanding of Barnstable's housing crisis through continued research, outreach, and public education of our housing needs. We don't get people to understand what the needs are and have them fully reflect on the needs of our entire community, that it's going to be much harder to support the strategies that are outlined in the plan. These are not all of the strategies that are in our plan. I'm going to run through them quickly, but I wanted to sort of point out the ones that I think are most currently relevant and the sort of ones that are most ripe for potential implementation. We have a new town council subcommittee looking at housing. We have the governor with a bond bill currently in the House, currently in the Senate, but we think it's going to be reconciled. So a lot of moving pieces on the local and state level around housing right now. One thing that's gotten a lot of attention are tax exemptions for year-round rentals. We provide year-round homeowners with a residential tax exemption, but if I own a home and rent it to somebody year-round, we don't get that same benefit. So looking at tax exemptions for those who are willing not to short-term rent, but to rent their house to people year-round. This used to be something that would have required special legislation, but a recent act allowed communities to do this by a local option, tax exemption to property owners who rent year-round. Barnstable could consider this for those who are renting to those with primary residency. Could also be used to bolster our accessory affordable apartment program, which got a little bit, the incentives there got a little bit gutted when we did ADUs by right. But if you could agree to rent to somebody income qualified and get the tax exemption, it might be incentive enough to continue with the paperwork and monitoring that's required. And those are deed restricted units on our SHI. So I very much encourage the town to look at tax exemptions. It is available, and we do already have that program, which could reduce the administrative burden of implementing it. Year-round deed restrictions, I've been a huge advocate to put this in the bond bill. It was not included in the bond bill. Now there's a lot of advocacy to at least put it in the seasonal communities designation that might potentially come out of this. So the idea of this is not restricting units by income, but restricting units by year-round occupancy. So it's not how much they're earning, but it's whether or not they live here year-round. And this is a good strategy to, again, combat the idea that more and more of our housing are going to seasonal homeowners. Unless it goes through in the Bond Bill or Seasonal Communities Act, would require special legislation. They're already doing it in Provincetown. Zoning solutions, village scale, mixed use, multifamily development, missing middle and living large development, looking at places where we can amend zoning across town to allow appropriately scaled mixed use multifamily development in and around village centers. Look at West Main Street, look at Route 132, see where we have the availability of infrastructure and those services that people are already accessing by car. How could we use that baseline infrastructure in other places in our community to support thoughtful residential density? And obviously that's going to look a little bit different depending on where it is, but paying a lot of attention to the design of that in the context of where it is located to make sure that it fits in with the character of our community and again provides that high quality of life for everyone. Certainly other options around building code changes for tiny homes. There are zoning options coming through 40Y to allow for small-scale starter homes, which is a huge missing piece of our housing stock. You can't buy a home anymore. There are no reasonable starter homes anywhere. So this program helps create an avenue for that. And a number of communities around Massachusetts have set up zoning to allow single-family home conversions, particularly for large historic properties that aren't really meeting people's today's housing needs. But if you have a large home, maybe you can turn that into a 2 or 3 family dwelling. No change to the exterior appearance of it, but accommodating more using what we have. Looking at our inclusionary ordinance, it's a dull tool right now. We passed it about 20 years ago. 10% of our units, of new units in a project must be 65% of AMI, and that's exactly what we're producing in our new developments. Almost all of our new developments have about 10% of our units at 65 AMI, but we're not catching up. We're not getting more affordability that we know we really need. So we should take a look at strengthening this ordinance. I would encourage us to be thoughtful about it. It's easy to say, why don't we just make it 25%, and developers will come and give us that much more affordability. But I think if we look at Falmouth, certainly as a case study, they've had a 25% inclusionary requirement. They're not seeing any new housing production, but they're seeing a lot of unfriendly 40B because there's no incentive to comply with zoning because those affordability requirements are so high. So really thinking about different requirements for different size projects. It's a lot harder for a smaller developer to build affordable housing than it is for a larger project that can sort of spread spread that cost over many units, and also looking at alternative options for compliance with less process. So maybe paying a partial fee or providing units off-site. Right now, there's only one way to comply. But taking a look at this ordinance, again, trying to find other locations within the town of Barnstable that are underutilized and finding incentives to encourage housing development in those locations, really targeting specific properties. We see some communities going out and buying these properties and redeveloping them themselves for affordable housing, but you could also let the market do the work through some sort of innovative zoning. Short-term rentals certainly have been a major topic of conversation. I would say, if the community is going to take this up again, use data to understand the challenge. We've been collecting data on short-term rentals, what they are, how much they rent for, who rents them and where for years now. Understand the challenge in developing policy proposals. Figure out which problems we're trying to solve before we start going into a process to solve them. You can regulate. There are different challenges. Short-term rentals present challenges for neighborhoods and neighbors that have to live next to short-term rentals, and then they present challenges to the housing market. Those should be differentiated and regulated distinctly and thoughtfully. That would be my advice for the town going forward. And also look for opportunities to generate revenue. Tax them like crazy, especially corporate short-term rentals, which I don't think have a place in our neighborhood, but if we are going to allow them, at least tax them. We talked about underutilized municipal property and continuing perhaps even more aggressively to look at opportunities to do that. Working on programs that provide direct assistance to people in need. This is CPA eligible, so rental assistance. Maybe you can afford that unit, but you couldn't get first last rent. I mean, who could on a $2,100 apartment? So even if you could get your family in there, these kind of programs that help people into more stable situations, either on a one-time basis or an ongoing, say, 3-year basis with some financial support and counseling. These are programs that we've done a lot of research into. We've worked with Brewster, who has a great program, and with a little bit of administrative capacity could roll out very easily. So it's more on the administrative side, but participate in the Regional Housing Service Office. This is coming together. Affordable housing sounds easy, but it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of compliance in the back. It's monitoring deed restrictions, and that's a lot for certainly a big planning department like ours, but also small planning departments across the Cape. We should be working together on this, and there's finally movement to establish a Regional Housing Service Office. Barnstable should definitely think about participating, maybe even think about hosting this as the largest community on the Cape. It's going to need a home eventually. Right now, the county's sort of piloting it, but this is an important service to everybody who's looking for affordable housing. And then the plan includes a number of strategies around promotion, coordination, partnership, public-private, with employers in our community who are certainly looking to retain and develop staff, and with not-for-profits who are working on these problems. Again, I think affordable housing will continue to need subsidy. Right now, we're funding the trust primarily through Community Preservation Act funds, but that allows us to only fund a limited set of solutions. So really looking for other consistent sources to fund affordable housing program. I hope the local option real estate transfer fee goes into the bond bill, and I would hope we would adopt it. This is a small tax that you could provide on very high-end real estate transactions. The town can pull those levers to set it where they want to, but right now it's unclear whether or not this is going to make it in the bond bill. If it doesn't, it's certainly something seasonal communities could petition on a municipal basis to do. So again, we continue to take public comment. I provided all of you a summary of the housing production plan as well as the comments we have received to date. Also a summary of the comments that came from the Housing Committee on their May 29th meeting. We hope to welcome, again, comments at this meeting and your next meeting. If folks are looking to access the plan, we feature housing prominently on the town website. You can see it's on the left frame there. If you click on that housing tab, it'll bring you to our housing page, which outlines all of our programs, and there's a button there for the housing production plan update, where you can find the plan as well as specific comments. So again, next steps is that we've gone to Housing Committee. Planning Board must approve this plan at some point in this process. So we are really looking for your review and buy-in. It also has to be adopted by the Town Council. They've indicated that they want their Housing Subcommittee to participate in that process. So we're still waiting for dates and schedules on that. But again, with Planning Board and Town Council adoption, it can go from the town manager to the state. And then we can have a certified plan. So, if I didn't talk too long, that concludes.
Oh, it was great. Yeah.
That concludes
That's
my
fantastic.
presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Again, you have the public comments, you have the summary in front of you as well.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Appreciate it. And this is legally required, mandated by the state. Is that right?
Yes, they do. Under Mass General Law 40B, towns are to adopt a housing production plan. I don't think there's any penalty in not doing it, but there are certainly incentives to do it and keep it up, especially with this new housing choice designation that was put forward by the last administration.
And on the last slide there, the town manager reports to, there was an acronym there.
What we used to call DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, we now call the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. So that is essentially the housing arm of the state.
Okay, got it. Great. I think we should go to some board questions for Elizabeth, then go to the public, and then the board can make some final comments, and we'll look forward to talking about this at our next meeting. There's a lot here, and this is something that we've talked about a lot. So I really urge all board members to dig into this, really spend some time on it. Let's come up with questions, comments, maybe not for this moment, but for our next meeting. Our role is critical. We're kind of the ones that, kick things around, beat them around, edit them, tweak them, and get them ready for town council. So I just want us to maximize our effort, because it's something that I know we all care about deeply. So let's just go around quickly if we have, immediate questions for Elizabeth before we go to public comment. Michael?
I just want to say thank you so much for your presentation. I do not have any question at this moment.
Okay, all right, thank you. Matt?
Just a couple of suggestions. Number one is, again, I really am proud to be part of a town that has really led the charge in terms of trying to address this housing issue head on, and it's the same work I've seen going on for 10 or 15 years, and a lot of it's nice to see it come to fruition. So, well done. The continued investment in infrastructure is really important, not just wastewater, right? We have vast swaths of this town that have no public water. The Pilgrims came here a long time ago, still drinking out of the ground. Okay, so that would help things in terms of Title V compliance, those sorts of things. So really important. We'd love to sewer every place, but throw a couple water mains in, see what happens. Right? Go crazy. The energy code. I in terms of leading the way in rational thought and acceptance of what we currently have to deal with the energy code, I cannot say with enough emphasis that we must not consider the stretch code. We must not consider the municipal opt-in code. These are simply barriers to housing that make it more expensive and more difficult for people to build and now renovate their homes, right? So please remember that. We are currently on the highest base code in the nation. And it is likely soon that the federal government will not even issue federally backed loans to developers or builders who do not comply with this code. It will be devastating across the country. So for us to voluntarily subject ourselves to unnecessary additional energy code compliance is silly, and it's nonsense. And I commend the town for continuing to work under the base code, because it's a very good code. We build very efficient houses. We don't need all the other stuff. Okay. The other thing I would ask you to consider in that plan is that it is very likely that we will see an unwinding of the merger by zoning provision as part of the bond bill. It is likely to happen this year, and that could potentially free up lots in excess of 10,000 square feet. I think it should be probably 5,000 square feet or less. But I've personally dealt with it. I'm dealing with it now in an action with the Zoning Board of Appeals. We've bought lots. We've done this. These are all perfectly suitable, good, subdivided, legally existing lots that evaporate because of some silly nuance in Chapter 48, right? So, I don't know that we could do that as a town, but that is definitely something to consider, and it may be, it has moved to the reconciliation process. It may be part of this upcoming bond bill, so thank you.
Some excellent points, and you bring great perspective to this, so thank you for that, Matt. Tim?
Thank you. I cannot agree with my fellow board member Matt's comments here more as it relates to the building code, and it's, I think, imperative to avoid programs and some of these maybe incentives from the state that tie you in who automatically enter the town into something like that. I think it was the Green Communities Act that got most of these towns into that stretch energy code about 10 years ago, and then the most recent changes of the towns are kind of locked into adopting or coming down from the state, and they're in a tough place. And I think the town of Barnstable remaining in that base code is it's imperative, and it allows us a lot of ability to be able to solve some of these very large problems with every tool that we can put in our tool belt. I'm excited to dig into this. I think we should spend the time, do our homework, come back, workshop this. But at face value with this first review, it's glad to see the amount of thought and effort put into it thus far, to get to this point.
Yeah, well said. Bob?
Elizabeth, thank you for the presentation. Your PowerPoint, is that uploaded, or will it be uploaded at that tab on the planning webpage?
It can absolutely be
All right, good,
uploaded.
thanks.
We will do that.
I look forward to working outside the box to find some solutions to some things, and I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just before I go to Ray, the other thing that, I don't know exactly how you can do this, even if it's just an email to the board, but I'd love to learn more about the seasonal community designation and the bond bill. I mean, I'm sure I can Google these, but obviously if an email can go out, I think everyone would be interested in looking at those. Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Elizabeth, this is good stuff, and I just learned an awful lot from my two colleagues, my two engineering colleagues at the end of the dais there. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Tim. So it seems that we have two, multi-part, but two major thrusts here. One is infrastructure and one is the policy. And I think you've done a good job of touching on some of the policy things. I think these guys just hit the infrastructure part, which I'm not sure, that's more nuts and bolts, and maybe, I think, a function more of a town council that has to allocate funds. Please correct me if I miss out on that.
No, I mean, absolutely. I think thinking about how we align our housing demand with our capital infrastructure investment is certainly one of the biggest challenges we have in front of our local comprehensive planning committee as we do expand our sewer and wastewater management system, really in response to the need to clean our water and reduce the amount of nitrogen. It does provide limited opportunity to think about where we might have the potential to retrofit some of our existing development with housing to better meet our needs. But it's not the driver. And again, certainly sewer is only one piece of the puzzle. It's housing, it's public transit, it's all of those other pieces that really, I think, must come together to support that really village scale, mixed use type of development that I think our community so far has expressed that they really want to see. So yes, I think it's putting all of those pieces of the puzzle together relative to infrastructure investment as well as policy that's very mindful of balancing our sewer expansion with potential housing production in the future.
Yeah, very well spoken. The other thing is that just intrigues me is the public-private aspect of things, because it seems sometimes that the private sector gets things done faster, cheaper, and maybe arguably better. So I think you were, if I heard you correctly, the house on the hill in Marston's Mills, was that a good model?
Yeah.
And what has been your experience in that coming to fruition in Barnstable?
It was, and we spent a lot of time in planning and procurement working on that one very small project, so we had a good process model for larger projects like that going forward. Again, I think we see more and more communities across the Cape housing's a fun challenge because the town of Barnstable, we're never going to build housing. Like, we're not a construction people, we're policy and we're incentives. But one of the things that we see communities across the Cape doing more and more aggressively is playing that role in the real estate market, acquiring properties where the towns feel, where the people of the town feel that housing is appropriate and affordable housing is needed, and then going through a community process that allows for input in terms of what gets built where, and putting out an RFP for development that's responsive to that. So, that's sort of what we're looking at doing around our existing assets, the Adult Community Center, potentially the Marston's Mills property. But again, we see other towns across the Cape actually going out and purchasing that property for the purposes of affordable housing. And I think we're becoming better and better at that here in Barnstable, and hopefully can move things like that going forward.
Katuitt is in the throes right now of trying to figure out what to do with the elementary school. It was one of those, be careful what you ask for, you just might get it now. Yes. There's a bunch of people sitting around the table saying, knock it down? No, don't knock it down. What are we going to do with it? And so I think that the town actually can bring greater resources than a fire district. This is a fire district that actually acquired it. Yeah. And fire district fights fires and provides water. They don't. Right. They have no idea about how to develop or maintain and manage, which again, I think is a policy issue as much as a technical issue. It is. But I think what we're seeing more, at least in my time here now, I've seen a lot more capacity in our not-for-profit developers. A lot of them coming to the table, developers who weren't in the field, who are here now, and even those larger sort of off-Cape developers who are sort of finally seeing the need and the demand here on the Cape. Larger developers who can overcome the challenges of construction and material costs on the Cape. But we have to balance that with the idea that what we really, what's much more accepted as a community is that sort of smaller scale development. So it's a real challenge in terms of getting the production numbers that we need, but keeping the character small and village scale. Thanks. Yep. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate that. I have a ton of notes, ton of comments, ton of questions. I'm going to save most of them for next meeting and just touch on a couple things. I was really... It's neat and satisfying to see so many things that we've all talked about for so long, all in one place. So it's just great to have it all organized like this, and I commend you. I was blown away by the median sale price for a single-family home, $800,000, $2,000 for an average rental unit. I'm just blown away by that and how much that has changed in the past 5 years. I wanted to ask you, currently 6.2%, you mentioned our housing stock is designated as affordable. But on the screen there, you put, I did some quick math, over 500 projects, either permitted or in the process. That's going to churn out a lot of housing. And do you have any sense of what that 6.2 might bump to if each one of those approved or pending projects was actually built?
I don't. We are working on getting a good handle on that. We have a staff person right now focused on updating our subsidized housing inventory. That's not something that necessarily happens automatically, but we can sort of keep track on our own. So we're looking at projects that have come through that have units in them. We have some pending projects in the pipeline where we may be able to count more units than affordable, but my guess is overall, because of our 10% inclusionary requirement, when we have big projects, most of them hit that 10% mark. So if we don't ever require more than 10% for our big projects, we're never going to make gains in terms of affordability. So there are two different solutions to that. They're building more affordability into those projects so they hit 25% and all of the units count, or it's doing units with, more sort of targeted affordable housing where all of the units are affordable. And that's a different way to fund and develop projects. I'm a huge fan of mixed income projects where we can do them. But, again, they're different models that belong in different places with different developers.
Yeah, thank you for that. You just kind of sorted it in my mind. If you're just hitting 10%, you're maintaining. You're not getting ahead.
You're maintaining.
Yeah.
Right.
That just totally kind of figured it out for me.
Yeah,
so
but
thank you for
again,
that,
I
yeah.
think there's some really good research out there that says supply and demand when it comes to market dynamics actually do work when we think about housing. Communities that are not producing any more supply see an increasedness in homelessness. Communities that are producing more supply do see rent levels at least stay stable, not skyrocket. I'm not going to say they go down necessarily, but they at least see more stability in their rent levels. And so, again, it's a nice concept to say that there's supply and demand, but there's also a lot of research that supports that those numbers actually do happen in housing markets like ours.
For sure. Yeah, and I know Jim has shared the kind of housing unit tracker that we all keep, and you can see the progress. It's very, very evident and clear.
Yeah, and I think it's really important when you look at that to realize that we've had a lot of community conversation about some of these big projects, the 100-unit, 200-unit projects. But when you look at all the small projects, you could take a dozen of those smaller projects and they add up to the same number of units in the big ones. So
Right.
The zoning that we wrote is producing that redevelopment of underutilized property on a big scale, but it's also doing it on a small scale. It's that small scale infill, reuse of office space, that top of the shop, a couple of units. So it's very encouraging to see how it's working on both of those levels.
For sure, and a lot of that is due to the form-based code. I mentioned to Jim once that went through that it was going to put us out of business without regulatory agreements coming to us all the time, and we did a ton of regulatory agreements for very small ones. On the way here, I saw a lot that was cleared on Willow Street or Yarmouth Road right by 210 Main, so that one's coming to fruition. But, I say that jokingly. I think that's a good thing that less regulatory agreements are coming to us because those are so challenging from an application standpoint. So, those 500 projects that you put on the screen, I think a lot of that is due to the form-based code and how it's helping the community. Yeah, sure. I think about workforce housing. That's something that I'm going to look into a little bit more. I know that's something that's really hard to kind of wrap your head around. If the workforce is not fitting into one of those affordable brackets, how does it really play in? I know it's probably considered discrimination to say I'm going to sell these units, but only to people who work here year-round. I wish you could do that, but I don't think that you can do that. So that's something that I want to talk more about. Wanted to ask about those affordability standards, the 60%, 65%, 80%. Is this set by the state? And is there any talk of potentially tweaking that? I hear a lot of stories of people who make too much money to qualify for that, and I feel there's a lot of people in that workforce category that are between 70 and maybe 90% that really can't afford anything, and but they can't apply for the affordable housing. So they're in a rock and a hard place, and that's something I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah, those numbers are set by the state. I apologize, I should have put them in your packet. They're actually set by the federal government. They're updated every year. Ever since we saw a 35% jump in those numbers after COVID, we've heard a lot less of, working people can't afford them because they're pretty high. They're pretty high now as they are. So I think a lot of the problems are, people who really have very, very intense housing needs are more at 30% 80% of AMI, and that's a very vulnerable class. And then, yeah, you have your working class who are topping out over that 80%. We do see some communities, especially those in the Outer Cape, who are looking. I think Brewster increased their CPC eligibility to 120% of AMI, and I know there have been talk of increasing the eligibility for incomes that you can help fund and subsidize projects for. But that's also, permanently deed restricted housing. There's definitely something to be said about just creating naturally attainable market rate housing for folks as well.
Yeah,
a lot of people,
market,
don't want to go through a process where they have to be income qualified and
Right.
monitor every year, certainly. But as our needs become more dire, I think, we'll see more of a need and more willingness to do that.
Yeah, well said. And as a lot of people have said, as more units come online, that increased supply will hopefully stabilize prices. For me, I love the concept of 40Y. Personally, it's just a personal thing, and I'd love to hear that talked about more. And then I'm glad you mentioned the 132 kind of mall area, the seas of parking lots that are never used for anything except maybe a carnival a couple times a year. It just seems to me that's absolutely ripe for housing. It's walkable to so much. There's infrastructure right there. It's on sewer. So, I know we adjusted the zoning for one of those areas, and, I'd love to have the opportunity to do it for more areas and maybe focus just on multifamily housing rather than hotel, retail, anything like that. So anyways.
Yeah, I would say definitely think about adjusting for livability as well. We've talked a lot about this at LCP around what we used to call the industrial park, which now has 600-700 housing units in it. So thinking about as more and more people live in multifamily units in those spaces, really thinking about accessibility, connectivity to recreational resources, development out of playgrounds and dog parks and things like that in those areas to be able to support a population that lives in multifamily housing, because right now it's not. That type of infrastructure isn't really built out in those places. So I'd love to see more of a priority on that going forward.
Same, agreed. Yeah, and the last thing I wanted to mention is just the Housing Trust. I want to hear from them more. I want them to come before us. I want them to come before the CPC. I'm on the CPC, and we funneled over $4 million to them, and I want to know how it's being used and what they're doing. And I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's my fault and I haven't done enough research, but I want them in the room and I want to ask them. So
I think they will be the lead speakers at your CPC annual meeting coming up.
Yes, I have many questions
July,
ready, but I want this group with the opportunity as well. So, Jim, get him in here. All right, thank you. Let's go. Actually, Tim, you had some follow-ups?
Oh, yes, actually, discussing some of the 40B stuff, I just wanted to ask what was a finger on the pulse on maybe 40B applications in town over the last 5 or 6 years, if there have been a lot, and if there's a typical 40B project that comes through, or there really hasn't been too many in the past couple of years.
We don't do a lot of 40B in Barnstable. I think we've had one come through, a 14-unit out in Centerville, and that doesn't count like the friendly 40Bs, things that we do with Habitat, for example. But we don't do a lot of 40B. There's been a lot of support through our planning board and through our council for zoning for housing. And generally, we feel that when developers have come to us with an interest in developing housing, we've been able to collaboratively negotiate for good quality projects with more affordability through our zoning ordinance. And, thus there hasn't been a strong need or a strong push for developers to file 40B. Again, that stands in strong contrast to Falmouth, who were not engaging in those conversations with developers, or set an affordability level at 20, 25, 30%, and have ended up with some very unfriendly 40Bs down there. So I really think about finding that balance between there's been a lot of pushback on being more proactive about what we want instead of being reactive to developers, but that collaboration has produced a lot of affordable housing units, a lot of housing units, a lot of affordable housing units, and we haven't seen an unfriendly 40B, I'm not sure I've ever seen a big unfriendly 40B in my entire time here. So I think being proactive on housing and working collaboratively goes a long way to try to, when you zone for what you want, there's less of a need to, I think, to bring in things that don't fit in your community under 40B. Maybe we've just been lucky, but when I look at the experiences of other towns across the Cape, they haven't been. So, but I do think it speaks to the proactiveness of all of you in terms of zoning to meet the market needs.
Yeah, well said, and the town's willingness to partner with developers. Yeah, definitely. Anything else before we look to the public? Okay, any members of the public wish to speak on this draft housing production plan, please come forward. Again, we will have a future meeting talking about this, may even go to a third meeting. There's a lot to talk about, so seeing none, we will continue on. Jim, do you want a motion to continue this to our next meeting?
It's not a public hearing, so it's not necessary, but you can certainly, for the
Can't hurt,
public's
right?
consideration, yeah, that that it will be standing on the next meeting.
Okay. I move to continue the 2024 Housing Production Plan draft conversation discussion to the July 8th, 2024 meeting, 7 p.m. here at Town Hall. Do you have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ray. All those in favor? Matt?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Appreciate it.
Elizabeth.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay, next up, we have an A&R plan. Ray, would you mind reading our A&R plan on the agenda?
It would be a pleasure, Mr. Chairman. Approval not required plan. Larry Nicholas has submitted an application for an approval not required plan for Old Stage Road and Parker Lane, West Barnstable, Massachusetts. Assessors map 152 parcels 110 and 006.
Thank you very much, Ray, and we have the applicant here this evening. Welcome. And before we get to the applicant, Jim, I would love an overview of this. And if you don't mind, I'd like you to turn back the clock and go back to the Egan subdivision that this board voted on, and just give us a quick recap of that, and then we'll talk about this A&R.
All right, absolutely. So real quick, just before you on the screen, there's a slight tweak. I know Mr. Gallagher, the engineer for the applicants, submitted an updated plan with, I believe it was just relabeling that parcel where the proposed way is. This layout here is actually for the definitive subdivision. The link for the A&R, for some reason, it's not working. But it's the exact same plan with just relabeling of the bottom right box from definitive to an approval not required plan. So the layout itself is similar for discussion. To the chairman's point, yes, turning back the clock a few years back, Mr. Egan, which is essentially lot 3A and 2A on this plan, proposed a definitive subdivision to lay out the way that you see there to serve 2 lots and a drainage easement, and with a gravel way that was eventually approved by this board. In doing so, that has begun to lay out an opportunity for others that abut the frontage there. What you have before you this evening is the abutting property just south of the previously approved subdivision, filing for a definitive subdivision plan. You did see a preliminary subdivision of this site not that long ago. And before you this evening is what is essentially a 2-lot subdivision. However, I will note that there is an existing structure already on Lot 1, so there is an existing buildable lot or building lot, and this would add Lot 2, so it would be Lot 1 and Lot 2 as shown there. As I noted in the staff report, there are concerns about adequate frontage for Lot 2. As you'll see on this plan, there is 67.78 linear feet of frontage. And then the plan reflects additional frontage, which is shown as an access easement on an abutting lot. I have concerns that that is not adequate frontage. I do have, and I have shared my concerns with the applicant, but I'm sure they can provide some explanation there. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'm sure the applicant can provide a brief presentation as well.
Great, thank you so much, Jim. And the board is in receipt of a staff report dated June 2024. And welcome. If you could state your name for the record and give a presentation. Just make sure that the green light is on. Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Attorney Jeffrey Johnson on behalf of the applicant. I think that your question for Jim really had more to do, if I'm interpreting it correctly, concerning the Egan subdivision. If you were to look on the plan that's up on the roster here, Mr. Egan proposed and got approved a subdivision creating a couple of lots with physical access from the service road coming up Parker Lane. Mr. Nicholas, who abuts that property now to the east and south, is proposing to create one new lot that's, as you can see, a very large lot, and taking an existing dwelling and calling that a separate lot. The existing dwelling takes its frontage on Old Stage Road. As part of the proposal, we're moving Parker Road to the west into that little section that Mr. Gallagher has produced an updated plan where he's labeled it not a separate buildable lot. The question of frontage came up. We have 67 plus feet on Parker to the northeast, and by an easement would have the additional frontage necessary to create 150 foot of frontage on Parker. But after discussing this with Jim, we've decided that it's easier, and we've modified the plan, and again, Mr. Gallagher has an updated version of it, to show the technical frontage as being part of Parker Road that's relocated, and the first section of it, in the southernmost portion, the southwest as it were, is over 177 feet, and then there's another 113 feet. So in terms of technical frontage, we believe that this plan would satisfy the A&R requirements. In terms of the adequacy of access, which is another criteria for an A&R plan, it's already been determined by the signing of Mr. Egan's plan that coming in off the service road up Parker would be adequate access for his two lots. The goal here is to avoid creating a big subdivision and a speed throughway. Mr. Nicholas's desire is to have one new buildable lot, being his lot 2, and essentially having a driveway to get there. We don't see a need to create an additional lot out of this, even though we probably have enough acreage if we were to go to the expense of doing a full-blown subdivision plan, et cetera. It's just not economical. It doesn't make any sense. It's not good at this point for the neighborhood. I don't believe anybody would really be in favor of that at this point. We have pending with you a subdivision plan which we would intend to withdraw if this A&R gets signed. As a result of the A&R was really put forth because of some of the technical requirements of a staff report from the engineering department that the subdivision plan received. And it, again, it's just, it doesn't make a lot of common sense to build, you know, a major thoroughfare through there. It's really just one very nice, large, additional buildable house lot. I don't know, Frank, do you have that new Mylar with the new notations on it? Jim, can we give that to you at this point, or?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly can. Let me just engage in conversation for a moment.
Certainly.
I believe I'm following along, and certainly I commend you for going through the A&R process as thoroughly as you can. If you can make it work as an A&R, I commend you for doing that, because it's certainly much simpler and straightforward than a subdivision. I just want to kind of work through this piece by piece, nice and slow, for the benefit of myself, the board, and the public. First of all, the dotted lines that appear on Lot 1 and Lot 2, from my understanding, that represents a historic way. Is that right?
Yes, it's a.
And not a physical road, it's just a historic way.
It's a road that is depicted on what we would call the Walling map. Are you familiar with the Walling map?
Yes, okay, yep.
So it has a certain status by being on that map as a private, recognized
Ancient way?
ancient way. And we have the right, under the M&T Builders case, to move any private ways within our boundaries, so long as we don't frustrate the purpose of the way for anyone who is benefited by it. So we're going to take that dotted line as it relates to Lot 1 and move it out of that house's backyard and make it a straighter shot, although we don't intend to build it at this time.
So basically, take that ancient way, slide it north into that sliver labeled Parcel A, not a buildable lot, which is 33 feet wide. However, it would not go all the way through to Old Stage. It would stop. Does this
Well,
Mylar show where it would stop?
So this Mylar here, you can see the dotted line connects up to where Mr. Egan's property is, to our northwest.
Right, but on the other side, on the Old Stage side, you're saying it wouldn't connect to Old Stage, so about where would
Well,
it stop, do you know?
Old Stage, well, it already does connect that. You can drive a truck down it now from Old Stage Road. You can drive a truck, or Mr. Nicholas can drive a truck, he tells me, and I believe him. He can drive it the entire length,
No?
all the way from Old Stage Road, all the way out to the service road. Is that correct, Larry?
Okay,
And Frank, that's correct?
okay.
So it's passable now, shown on some more ancient plans. It was traditionally 33 feet in width, and we're just proposing to straighten it out again.
So the access to Lot 2 would be via Old Stage?
No.
Is that correct, or Service
No,
Road?
It would be off the service road. We have an easement. Well, first of all, we own part of it, the first 67 feet of it, shown on this plan. And we have an easement from Mr. Egan that's in your package to traverse what he received an easement for and over his bend in that road. So the physical access would be coming up the same driveway that he's going to be using for his property, and we're participating in the construction of that road.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yeah.
So before you right now is an approval now required plan. So the very sense that we're talking about realigning a way is a bit concerning, meaning that we are moved beyond an approval now required plan into a subdivision plan. So I would be interested in the plan that was mentioned, because really what you guys are looking at is, do they have adequate access, and are we creating this lot with adequate access? Does he have frontage? And the plan that has been provided to date according to myself and according to our town attorney, they don't have adequate frontage for this lot. So unless Mr. Gallagher has something otherwise, I would suggest that this be continued to a later date for, I'm happy to work with the applicant to try and remedy this, redesign it perhaps, what have you. Otherwise, unless Mr. Gallagher has new frontage that hasn't been presented, it's just simply doesn't meet an approval not required plan.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was at. Thank you, Jim. That's kind of where I was at when I came into this. Obviously you need 150 feet based on the materials that myself and the board has. We've got, 67 feet, 68 feet, in order for us to make any sort of other determination, we would need these materials. And if there's new materials on that table, it's just, unfortunately, we're going to need to continue because that's going to need to be submitted, in a proper manner, given out to the board ahead of the meeting to review. So I think the best thing to do is to continue. Just make sure the green light's on. See the button that says push?
I believe at the advice of Mr. Gallagher that we think a continuance might be in order to let us work those details out. But we wanted to take the opportunity tonight to discuss with you at least the start of this. No offense to anyone, but
Oh, no.
2 weeks ago I was here and you didn't have a quorum, and I looked at the calendar and I saw July 8th and I thought, are we going to have a quorum then? And I didn't want to get into a situation where we weren't having an open and frank discussion. And so, again.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your comments and application. It's very rare that this board doesn't have a quorum, so going forward, you should expect us to be here. And we do, I will mention that if we do continue to July 8th, we will still be within the time allotted for us to make a decision.
Sure.
So I certainly recommend that, and please forward us any updated materials so we have time to review. We'll go from there.
And you saw my request to continue the subdivision, which is later on your agenda this evening.
Continue that as well.
Yes, please.
Great.
And you're welcome to take that out of order if you would like to clean that up while the applicant's here.
Understood. Thank you. Okay, any questions, comments from the board before we seek a motion to continue? All right, could we have a motion to continue?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue the approval not required plan subdivision number 829 as presented tonight to July 8th at 7:30 PM.
Second?
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman, may I-
Yeah, we jumped to the subdivision.
May I make a slight amendment to the?
Shouldn't we do the A&R first?
Yes, and also 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Hit the A&R first, then we'll get the subdivision.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll modify my motion if I could.
There we go. Yep.
So I would make a motion to continue the approval not required plans on Old State Road and Parker Road in Barnstable, Mass, titled Relocation of Parker Land and Proposed Lots 1 and 2 to the July 8th meeting at 7 PM.
And I will second that.
Thank you, Ray. All those in favor? Matt?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. And we will now seek a motion to continue. We're going to jump ahead on the agenda. I'm going to read the agenda item real quick. This is subdivision number 829. Larry Nicholas has submitted an application for a definitive subdivision for Old State Road, Parker Lane, West Barnstable, Mass. Assessor map 152, parcel 110 and 006. And if we could have a motion to continue this to July 8, 2024.
Mr. Chairman, actually, just as a cleanup, since we didn't have a quorum at the last meeting, you do have to technically open this hearing and then continue the matter, please.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing on subdivision number 829.
Thank you, Tim, in a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Michael. All those in favor? Matt?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ray? And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. And now we'd seek a motion to continue subdivision number 829. I'll do it. I move to continue subdivision number 829, definitive subdivision for Old Stage Road and Parker Lane, West Barnstable, Mass. Assessor map 152, parcels 110 and 006, to our July 8th, 2024 meeting at 7 PM here at Town Hall. Do we have a second?
This is Tim, I'll second.
Thank you, Tim. All those in favor? Matt?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Thank you very much. We look forward to the updated materials, and we'll see you on July 8th. All right, moving along to our next subdivision. This is number 828. Tim, do you want to read this one in?
Sure, this is back now. Subdivision number 828, Wind Development Company LP has submitted an application for a definitive subdivision for 307 Main Street, Hyannis, MA, Assessor's Map 327, Parcel 103. This has been continued from the May 13th and the June 10th, 2024 meeting. And this is a continued public hearing. It's already been opened, but
Excellent.
no quorum last week, or last time.
Well, this one was actually opened prior to our last meeting, so we're good on this. Already open, no need to reopen. The board is in receipt of a staff report dated May 9, 2024. We're also in receipt of a development agreement draft for subdivision number 828. I'm going to start with Jim. Jim, do you have any comments, introductory comments on this?
Yeah, so as you may recall, 307 Main Street definitive subdivision plan is a 5-lot multifamily residential subdivision. You have received a preliminary subdivision for this specific proposal. You also have received updated correspondence from all applicable departments. Both Hyannis Fire has provided their comments and are satisfied with the proposal, as well as the Department of Public Works had one outstanding comment from the last meeting, and they have since been satisfied with the edits that you have before you.
That's great to hear. Sounds like we've kind of got our ducks in a row here. So welcome. Please state your name for the record and brief overview.
Yep, Paula Thompson from Beals and Thomas. I am a civil engineer, and I'm here with Rob Brennan from Smolik and Vaughn. They're the project attorneys. We are here representing Wind Development for this definitive subdivision plan, which some of you may have seen earlier this year for the preliminary plan. So as Jim mentioned, the site is a 1.8-acre site on Main Street in Old Colony Road in Hyannis. And the proposal is to subdivide the lot into 5 lots, multifamily residential lots with a 230-foot-long cul-de-sac. You can see here the technical design of the cul-de-sac includes sewer, water, drainage. It's designed in accordance with the subdivision rules with regard to off-grading, center line grading of the road. We have satisfied the fire department comments showing that they can turn around the center of the cul-de-sac. They also asked for a fire hydrant at the end of the cul-de-sac, which we've included. And we've gone through multiple iterations with the engineering department and satisfied all their comments with regard to stormwater design, which included additional stormwater management on Old Colony Road and infiltration of that stormwater from Old Colony Road. We have also included a sidewalk from subdivision road to Main Street to kind of make a connection from Main Street all the way through the cul-de-sac. We also coordinated with them access to Lot 5, which is the lot at the corner of Main Street and Old Colony. They wanted to make sure that we weren't providing another driveway off of Old Colony Road. And what we ended up on is we're going to provide access to Lot 5 through the subdivision road. And we have a sewer and water easement that goes out to Main Street. And that will also be the access for Lot 5. So we're not creating another curb cut off of Old Colony Road. I want to point out the waivers that we're requesting. One is one that you saw at the preliminary, which is you have a provision in the subdivision rules and requirements that says you want to create streets that are through streets. In this case, the abutting property already has access off of Ocean Street and Main Street through an easement off of Main Street. So we are ending the subdivision road so it doesn't connect to the abutting lot, but the abutting lot does have connection through an existing easement that will be maintained for their access. So that's the first waiver that we're requesting. The second waiver, you have specific requirements for the location of borings so that we can make sure that the soils on site are supportive of the infrastructure, supportive of stormwater management. We don't have borings at each location for example, they require borings at every catch basin, every drain manhole, every structure. So we provided a geotechnical report that gives you an overall description of the soils on site, which are very consistently sand. That's in your package, so we're just asking for a waiver from the specific locations of those borings. And that is the overview of the proposed subdivision, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you so much. So let's see, we'll do three things. We'll look to the board for questions or comments. We'll see if there's any public comment, and then we'll talk and see if we are comfortable with the findings, waivers, and conditions. So starting with board questions, comments, Matt? Michael?
Almost had, thank
Tim?
you.
No questions.
Bob?
I just have a couple questions to make sure I understand something you just told us. I think you said that
Get
Cars-
closer to the mic. Yeah.
cars coming into Lot 5 would access off of Old Colony on Road A, is that right?
So they're going to access Old Colony from Road A, so they won't have their own separate driveway coming in from Old Colony. So they'll go Old Colony to Road A and down, yep, exactly, where Jim has the little hand.
Right.
Coming down that
I just want
easement.
to make sure I understood that.
Yep.
So they will not be entering off of Main Street?
That's correct.
Okay. You also mentioned an easement from the adjacent landowner, and Jim is moving is it where that lot line is between Lot 2 and 3? Is there going to be an easement, a roadway they can use through there?
It's actually right on the edge of Lot 3. Yeah, right in the direction that Jim is indicating now. It goes out to Main Street, and it provides access to the abutter.
All right, so,
And on this plan, I'm sorry, but north is down, so that's a little bit odd, but it's to the west of the Lot 3.
so the adjacent landowner using the easement would exit onto Main Street as opposed through Road A onto Old Colony?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Bob. Ray, anything? Okay, great. Any members of the public want to make public comment on this item? Seeing none, we will look for a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I
go ahead.
move to close the public hearing.
Great, thank you, Ray, in a second.
Second.
Thank you, Matt. All those in favor, Matt?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Public hearing is closed. Personally, I am comfortable with all findings on page 2 of the staff report, numbers 1 through 3. I am comfortable with the 2 waivers, and I also have read and agree with the conditions, numbers 1 through 13. Any members of the board wish to edit or discuss any of those waivers, conditions, or findings? Matt, Michael, Tim, Bob, Ray? Okay, beautiful. So a motion on this, just a reminder, going to read those 3 findings on page 2 and can reference the waivers and conditions by stating as written in the staff report, May 9, 2024.
Oh, this is clearly a job for Bob.
Well,
He takes the big
yeah.
ones.
Tim had the agenda item though, so,
And that's usually how that goes.
you know, we give you first right of refusal, my friend.
I'll give it a shot.
All right, let's do it.
I would like to make a motion to approve definitive subdivision at 307 Main Street, Hyannis, MA, subdivision number 828, dated April 11th, 2024, by Beals and Thomas, Inc., with the following findings that can be found in the staff report dated May 9th, 2024. Finding 1, the application has been submitted for approval of definitive subdivision plan, Form C, by Wind Development Company, LP, dated April 11th, 2024. Number 2, the definitive subdivision plan is shown on the plan entitled 307 Main Street Definitive Subdivision Plan in Hyannis, Massachusetts, subdivision number 828, dated April 11th, 2024, by Beals and Thomas. Number 3, the applicant has requested a waiver from the subdivision rules and regulations in accordance with Section 801.5A. The board may waive strict compliance with these requirements when, in its judgment, such actions is in the public interest and not inconsistent with the intent or purposes of subdivision control law. In accordance with Section 801.5A of the Code of the Town of Barnstable waiver criteria, the planning board has made the following findings. A, granting the waivers requested are in the best interest of the citizens of the town. B, the plan is well designated and in keeping with the general design principles set forth in Article 5? 6 of the subdivision rules and regulations. C, there is adequate access to lots for uses intended thereon. D, the plan is in keeping with the character of the surrounding area. And grant of waivers as written in the staff report dated May 9th, 2024.
And mention the conditions too, conditions as found.
And conditions as found in the staff report dated May 9th, 2024.
Well done, thank you. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, I'll give it to Ray. Thank you, Ray. All those in favor, Matt?
Well done, Tim.
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is a
Always get me.
request of road name change. Tigran Jahunts of 108 Field Road, Marston's Mills, has submitted a request for a road name change, and this has been continued from June 10th, 2024. We are in receipt of a staff report. Let's see. Road name change request, all right, dated June 4, 2024. And there isn't a ton here for the board to consider. The biggest thing for us is to hear from the fire department, which we have, and we are in receipt of that letter. It's in the materials, and they did not have any concerns related to this. Jim, is there anything else you'd like to give us on this one?
Yeah, but if I may, real quick, I believe we need a motion to open the hearing first.
My apologies, okay. Could we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ray. All those in favor, Matt?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. The public hearing is open.
Thank you very much. So you're correct, Mr. Chairman. So what is before you today is a proposal for a road name change for a portion of Field Road in Marston's Mills. Typically, when a road is named, it goes through your standard Mass General Law 48 for definitive subdivision. This actually did back in 1965. It's actually subdivision 058 where we're at, subdivision, what did we
29.
just? Yeah, 829 now, so.
Well done.
It's pretty far along. So yes, before you this evening is our standard procedures for considering a road name change. It is a public hearing before the planning board for your consideration. Change of a road name shall be of majority vote of the planning board. One of the main items is for review by the town of Barnstable's engineering division, as well as the fire district in which it resides, in this case, ComFire. ComFire has provided a letter finding this proposal permissible and without any conflicts of existing roadways. So obviously that's for emergency response, making sure you don't have duplicative names or challenging names that they wouldn't be able to quickly respond to. So ComFire has found this proposal satisfactory. So again, this is a public hearing, and the board may consider this change. Again, it's a portion of in your staff report. I do have some attachments reflecting the original subdivision, the portion and the abutters that may or may not be impacted. Really, this is the only parcel that truly fronts on this this portion of way. There is another parcel 122 Treetop Circle, which also, as it's addressed, fronts on Treetop Circle, so would not be impacted by this address change. And then at the end of this way is open space for a subdivision. So this open space is deed restricted in perpetuity, to my understanding, for a subdivision. So again, would not be impacted by this. So this is really the only parcel that would be impacted. Attachment 3 just reflects Google imagery, just showing the extent of the way, a fairly short portion thereof.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you for the staff report, very detailed, and for the attachments as well to give us some context. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for waiting. Please state your name for the record, and you can give whatever comments you'd like.
My name is Tigran Gichuns. I'm the owner of 108 Field Road. I have purchased the property 10 years ago, and I invested close to $2 million in hardscape. And I turned the house, one of the properties probably in Massachusetts with such hardscape, in scope and variety, mosaic, all kind of stuff. By being American Armenian, I would like to change that small section portion of the road to ancient Armenian way, just like appreciation to my background. And I would like to change only that small portion, not to intimidate the neighbors, So I hope you guys will consider my petition. And if you would like to see some evidence of the projects I completed on that project, on that property, I got some pictures, and Jim also has some stuff. I don't know if he can play it.
Great. Well, very much appreciate that, and very much respect you for, honoring your heritage.
Thank you.
And, certainly I have no problem with this, hearing from the town engineer and the fire department, seeing that they have no conflict. I would certainly support this. Look for questions or comments from the rest of the board. Matt?
I have none.
Okay. Michael?
No, I'm all set.
Tim?
All set.
Bob?
I'm fine.
Ray?
I'm good, too.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak? Seeing none, we can go ahead and I move to close the public hearing. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. All those in favor, Matt?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. The public hearing is closed. And with that, we would look for a motion to put this through and approve it.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we grant the applicant's request to change the road name for a portion of Field Road to Ancient Armenian Way as identified in the submission to the planning board.
Thank you, Matt. And a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Michael. All those in favor, Matt?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Congratulations.
much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great.
Get that road sign. Get that road
Yeah,
sign.
get that sign.
Call the DPW. Yeah, they'll make you order one in this.
Yeah, Jim can help. Follow up with Jim.
Makes them on the weekends.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'd love to, honestly, I'd love to see. Jim, if you could share some of that, I'd love to see. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
That's awesome.
It really is. Yeah, that was great. Okay, so general correspondence, just have one. Chapter 91 notice for 174 Starboard Lane, Osterville, row, maintaining existing pile. Jim, any staff updates for us or a weekly recap?
Yeah, real quick. We had a great presentation a little over a week ago at the old Wings building on Main Street, where Sturgis now has a community building presenting the land use recommendations and findings for the Hyannis Harbor Master Plan. It was about 30 to 40 of the public came in attendance. We have our recommendations about to be posted onto the master plan website under the planning department with a great story map and other reflections of what our really good consulting team made of Fort Point Associates that does a lot of harbor work, teaming with Woods Hole Group to understand the climate resiliency focus. So a lot of great opportunities there. Certainly check it out. Happy to come to the board at a later meeting with some of the recommendations maybe we could consider in the future. Along those lines, we presented at the Greater Hyannis Civic Association talking about two-way Main Street and the 6 Points intersection. That is gaining momentum. We're still working through the final designs for the 6 Points intersection, looking at more creative entry to the Harbor District, a welcoming change to the current configuration. There's still ongoing discussions there. Also, the local comprehensive planning committee was to meet this Thursday. However, town council did have to move their meeting to this Thursday. So unfortunately, the local comprehensive planning committee was bumped to the July meeting. So they'll be meeting again on July 25th, working through final draft chapters. Hopefully, we're getting pretty close. Only a few more chapters remaining, and then we can get into the implementation stage, which is, I'm sure, what everyone's eager to learn about and participate in. So that's what we've been doing over the last couple of weeks.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Any questions for Jim on that staff and weekly update? Okay, all right. One matter not reasonably anticipated by the chair. We are going to put the nomination of officers on the agenda for our next meeting, July 8th, 2024, here at 7 p.m. Certainly, if the board would like me to, I'd like to continue as chair if the board so pleases. So, and we'll see what happens. So, let's see, approval of minutes. Look for a motion to approve the May 13th, 2024 draft minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. And a second?
This is Tim.
Thank you, Ray. And Matt? All those in favor? Matt?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Again, future meetings, July 8th and July 22nd, 2024, here at Town Hall, 7 p.m. Anything else before we adjourn? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Matt. Second?
I second it.
Thank you, Michael. All those in favor? Matt?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.